everybody, welcome to the Paranormal Connection. I'm your host, Donna Wilberg. Tonight we are so pleased to be back with Michael Tellinger. He's an author, explorer, a scientist. He is just full of so much information, and as we said last week, it's going to blow your mind. So I'm so happy that you're here with us this evening to share with this information. And let me introduce our guest, Michael. Nice to have you back.
Thank you very much. Lovely being back.
Yeah, all the way from South Africa. You're doing a tour in the United States, and we are so happy to have you here in Sacramento.
That's fantastic. I love to share this information, and thanks for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, it's so far we've talked about some things that are just so incredible, and we addressed 2012. We kind of opened the door on that a little bit, told people not to be afraid. Let's go into a little bit more of the ancient, the links between Egypt and all the other civilizations, and how they link to your hometown, South Africa.
Yeah, that's the spectacular process of this journey of discovery that I've had the pleasure of experiencing. You know, first you come across these stone circles, and the first year I walked up and down these mountains just completely dumbfounded by what we discovered. Thousands of ruins that have been untouched, and many of them lie covered by soil. In fact, the large majority of most of these ruins still lie covered by soil. And that brings us to another possible part of the debate, is what happened to the civilization? Where did it disappear to? Why did it disappear? You know, more than 10 million stone structures, and they're just gone. So you go through these ruins, and at first you just stare at them and you go, what's going on here? And slowly but surely you let the information, you know, I took thousands and thousands of photographs and looked at them and analyzed them and try and figure out what the hell is going on here, you know. And then you start coming across petroglyphs carved into stone. But these petroglyphs are so badly eroded and so deeply covered by the growth of patina, which is the skin of the rock, that it immediately tells us that we're dealing with something extremely old. This is not something that happened the other day.
Yeah. And
not just a few thousand years, but many, many thousands of years. And then I start discovering that there are thousands of carvings and petroglyphs into extremely hard rock near the town of Kimberley in South Africa, at a site called Driekops Eiland. Thousands of images, and among those images you'll find references, links to the Sumerians with a cross in a circle, which has African references and African ancient history. And the knowledge keepers, the indigenous knowledge keepers, tell us what these symbols mean in African terms, not in Egyptology or in Sumerian terms, but they actually mean, for example, the cross in a circle, which is a distinctly recognized Sumerian symbol, means Mabona, the Lord of Light. And then I came across a circle and a cross with three lines coming out of it, like the original Sumerian winged disc. Very basic, naive drawing and carving in Sumeria, and now we're finding it in rocks in South Africa. And with the meaning of great is the all-seeing Lord of the sky, Mabona. So we find that the cultures in Southern Africa have the same references to these as you find further north. And then we find pentagons with serpents carved in it. We find an ankh carved among these ruins in Southern Africa. Now the reason I bring this up, and many other things, but the reason I bring this up is because the kind of stone that they carved in, it's a stone called andesite, which is the same kind of stone as diorite, which is that very hard black stone that several of the Egyptian pharaoh statues have been carved out of. Now if you look at these statues that have been lying around for 4,500 years, and they look like they were carved yesterday, they're perfectly smooth, and you compare that to the erosion and the wearing patterns on these carvings in South Africa on the same kind of stone, it gives you a very clear indication which of the two is older.
Okay.
Okay, and we're dealing with something a lot older in South Africa than in Egypt or in the Near East. And these are just two examples.
Now, does this have to do with the way the land formations were, that people were able to travel further, or you're saying this is some other kind of connection?
No, we're dealing with a post-Diluvian, post-flood civilization as opposed to a pre-flood civilization.
Okay.
And this is really the conclusion I've reached, is what happened to this great civilization of probably more than 50 million people, more than 10 million stone structures, all integrated as a giant spider's web mesh with roads and channels linking every circle together. It's spectacular when you start looking at it. In my book, Temples of the African Gods, I show several aerial photographs and images of this. And the reason they were so integrated, because they used sound as a source of energy. And they connected this energy into everything they did. Remember, their primary occupation was, or primary objective was to mine gold. And get as much gold out of the ground as they could.
Let's talk about that, because now we're coming into right now where there is such a obsession about gold, and the quest for gold, and all these places are popping up that, you know, sell your gold. You know, it seems like they're everywhere.
And there's a very good reason for that.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Because the gold has never belonged to us. It does not belong to us. It has always belonged to the gods. If you think about when the conquistadors arrived here, or wherever the explorers from Europe arrived in the last 500 odd years, when they came across these vast deposits of gold, when they asked the native people, who does the gold belong to? The answer was always the same. It belongs to the gods. It's not ours. And that's where we make the mistake. We think as we got technology and cell phones and we so advanced, that's part of the game. That's part of the plan. The gold doesn't belong to us. And this is why the gold was removed as a standard for all monetary systems around the world and so forth. Because the moment they realized that if all the people descended on the banks to claim their gold, they'd be in big trouble. Right. So anyway, but we're going down a different path here now. It's all about gold. You can't separate human history from gold, man's obsession, but even more so, God's obsession, or the gods, plural, obsession with gold.
Now, the obsession with gold, is it used for tools? Is it used for communication? Is it used for the frequency? What is it used for?
Yeah, look, gold is not really a very useful thing on earth in our society today. The amount of gold that we mine is an obsession. It's anywhere near the kind of gold that we need to use for technology and daily life. We use a minuscule fraction of the amount of gold that we mine. So something else is going on. And this something else has been going on for many thousands of years. The gold is clearly not on this planet. Whatever has remained on this planet is in places that we're not aware of, and not where we think it is, where we can't get to it. And this is why suddenly there's this whole thing, sell your gold, we need your gold. Great, what a great scam to get people to get rid of their gold. That's just another side issue altogether. But the gold is very important to explain to people that the gold, it's not about the diatomic state or the shiny golden color gold. It's about the monoatomic state, the white powder of gold, the manna from heaven, the bread of God, and so forth. The white powder of gold is probably the best way to describe it, because in a monoatomic state, when gold, the two gold molecules that have a valent electron in its outer orbit, it makes the golden atom very unstable. It wants to bind with something, and the thing it likes to bind mostly is with itself. So it forms very stable bond with itself, but it's called diatomic gold. That's what it really is, but that's not what we get taught about it. So in its monatomic state, it binds with anything else. It will bind with it, and in one of the states that it forms, it creates this white powdery substance. And that has got no metallic properties. It defies measurement. You can't detect it. And now you got a problem, because when you try and work with this monoatomic gold, you're working outside the known parameters of science. And I know this because I've spoken to the father of gold and monoatomic gold, the guy who coined the phrase orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, David Hudson, who lives in Phoenix. This guy has got so much knowledge and information about the white powder of gold, monoatomic form of gold. It's a superconductor, it's got levitation properties, but does not respond to magnets at all, but it responds to the energy field on your hand. It levitates when you bring your hand close to it. And this gives us very interesting indicators as to what was going on in ancient times with people like Moses and so forth. Because remember, Moses burnt the golden calf in the fire and turned it into white powder.
Right.
Right. So that should already be, we should be suspicious. What the hell is Moses turning gold into white powder for? And that explains possibly why the ark never touched the ground, why it always levitated. And it clearly tells us in the Bible the ark never touched the ground. But what happens is that it seems to be, and this is a big subject, so I'd like to very quickly say, gold and its properties are directly linked to the energy fields of this planet. In its numeric scientific properties, its atomic number is directly linked to the energy fields of the body, and that number is of the planet. That number is 79. It's too complex to go into now, but it's spectacular when you start decoding these, what we call secret numbers of God, how it's all interconnected. And it enhances our light body, our aura, and it turns us into beings of light, which is clearly what the gods, the Anunnaki or the Elohim, were after. It was used for various other things as well, based on some of the Sumerian translations, but I think the main reason they wanted this was because it turned them into higher beings of light, and they could do all kinds of interesting things that we haven't, I guess, yet figured out.
we're reaching that point, though. We're looking into that. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the tools and the artifacts. Some of the things you've come across in your travels, it must be phenomenal.
Yeah. I must also tell you that on the gold mines, the Sumerian tablets refer to the Abzu as the place where the gold came from. So in my research and in my presentation of as scientific evidence, I try to present it as scientifically as I can, although, as you understand, I do like crossing over the lines into all spheres of information, including the paranormal and metaphysics, because they ultimately all cross over as a field of information. But we have found millions of gold mines in southern Africa. That clearly points to the fact that we are dealing with what the Sumerian tablets call the Abzu, where the gold came from. So now that we've established that southern Africa is what the Sumerian tablets refer to as the Abzu, it's a lot easier to decode and understand a lot of the other translations in the Sumerian tablets. For example, Enki's house, where he built his own house, and where he built a special place of observation or observing, which we now call Adam's calendar, which is one of the oldest structures on Earth, and which is the flagship among all these millions of stone structures. And all about gold, all about gold. Now, the question was tools and artifacts. This is what was one of the amazing discoveries that I made. Was I started picking up about 6 months or so after moving into the country, selling up in the big city, moving out into the one-horse town, and starting full-blown research, and became my life nearly 4 years ago now, exploring these ruins and walking up the mountains and going as far as I could. And at first you're blind to the stuff, your eyes aren't sensitized. And as time goes by and you start picking things up and realizing, oh my goodness, this is not just an accidental shape of a stone, it's a recurring shape that I'm finding more and more all over the place. And in among the various interesting tools and artifacts, like ancient phalluses of all kinds of shapes and sizes, to bird shape, which I refer to as bird-shaped stones, which seem to be the guardian mascots of these early gold miners and these gold mines, and they can be linked to the Zimbabwe birds, the strange Zimbabwe bird statues that were found in the Great Zimbabwe ruins in the early late 1800s, and then the most curious were two specific kinds of stone tools that I've been finding. Is these holes with the stones with holes in them, which the shaman and sangomas in South Africa refer to as sacred stones. Specifically, the amazing Credo Mutwa, South African preeminent shaman who many people will be familiar with. And Credo Mutwa, I've had the pleasure of meeting with several times, and he made it very clear to me that these stones were sacred stones because they were given to the humans by the gods. And they were given to the humans by the gods for very specific reasons, because they were tools that understood, that were based on the understanding of the laws of nature and sacred geometry, that the humans, the slave humans, were able to utilize as tools to create sound laser beams. Now it sounds like sci-fi. Now I know it sounds like science fiction, but when you come to my presentation, you'll understand what I mean. This stuff runs deep.
Well, you know, you see that in just about every culture, so you know that there's something going on with
Yeah.
that shape, as well as some of the others. You know, we're all looking for the answers that you're providing today.
Well,
What are these?
the one other curious thing linked to the stones or the holes or the sacred stones are these cone-shaped stone tools. These cone-shaped stones that when you first see them you go, what would this be used for? It wasn't used for hitting or stabbing because it's got no usage marks. They're perfect cone-shaped tools that are covered in this patina. And once again, I'm going to come back to this patina because the growth of the patina is extremely slow. We're dealing with 1,000 years per microscopic layer. So when you find a tool or an artifact that is covered in patina growth, the only conclusion we can make or reach is that this is an extremely old artifact. We're dealing with more than 100,000 years old. Not something that was just recently carved,
Yes.
or even a few thousand years. So scientifically, it's a very strong argument for the incredible ages that I often throw out and scare people with, I guess. Because we're dealing with a culture that I believe goes back 285,000 years. And that's how far back I take it. But these cone-shaped tools were actually, now we find links between South Africa, these cone-shaped tools, to the North American native Indian tribes that were from Pueblos in the Taos, that I got information. They use cone-shaped tools. The priests use cone-shaped tools in their ceremonies to bang together to make sounds. They seem to have forgotten why they do that, but the origins of that practice goes back to South Africa and Southern Africa, to the gold mining operations, because they were actually powerful tools, laser beam tools, or I should say Caesar beams, sound lasers.
Wow.
Okay, now this is why it all links together, and now we've linked it to a find here in that I saw the other day in the museum, the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose. They're cone-shaped stones that were left in the walls of the temples in Sumeria by the builders that said this is just to commemorate us building these temples. Well, what on earth are cone-shaped